Good morning, good afternoon almost to you all, and thank you for giving us the time to share with you guys a little bit about the Sector 4 and how we are structured. Before I start that, I want to echo Ken's comment to you, Jennifer, in regard to a great leadership you and John did throughout the whole MRC, and enjoyed working with you to move the MRC more effective and forward for future activities. Thank you for your service on all that front. As far as Sector 4 goes, apologize with pretty long slides, but we are not going to cover everything on this slide. It's good for informational background for future. I want to thank Robin Ye, Meg Albright, Stephen, and Daryl for helping putting this presentation together. And we're going to kind of play a little bit of a tag team that I will cover the U.S. base, and that Daryl and Stephen will talk about some Canadian side, and then I will conclude with the slides at the end. If we can go to slide number 2, our agenda is to share with you guys how we are represented, kind of show you a map of our territories, what are the key generation, transmission, and distribution assets, discuss a little bit about trade organization, what we are and we are not involved with, and how do we interact with one another in representation, policy input, and others, and some of our top issues in respect to the risks we see coming to our industry. If I can go to slide 3, please. As far as the Sector 4 goes, is made of for U.S. is made of the government-owned electric utility industries. We are truly like an integrated vertical utility, just like IOUs are, just like public powers are. We own generation, transmission, and distribution. Some of us are distribution known as load-serving entities that are customers, and then they provide their own services to various customers within their territory. And we are at the federal level. The PMAs are part of the Department of Energy. TVA is somewhat quasi-government entity, as the House Appropriation Committee approves the TVA budget, but they are not part of the power marketing agencies. And each PMA has their own statute in regard to how they distribute the federal facilities to their customer base, and we will get into that a little bit later on. Let me pass on the slide to Daryl for him to talk about how Sector 4 in Canada is organized. Daryl?
Thank you, Edison. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure can.
Okay, so a few differences about Canada as it compares to the US for Sector 4. And the one is that in Canada, the provinces have jurisdiction over energy matters. Another difference is that in Canada, the electricity assets or entities are not owned by the federal government. And a third difference is that in Canada, Sector 4 is comprised of provincial crown corporations. And what that means, they are corporations that are owned by their respective provincial government. So in most provinces, the provincial crown corporations serve the grid electricity for all customers within the province. And so that's generation, transmission, and distribution. And the last point I want to make on this slide is that in Canada, there is no FERC equivalent. So every province has their own regulatory body. Next slide, please. Back to you, Edison.
Thank you, Daryl. If we can go to slide 6. This slide shows there are 4 power marketing agencies. Bonneville Power Administration, moving from the west to the east. Western Area Power Administration, Southwest Power Administration, and Southeast Power Administration. As you notice, we are pretty much covered a lot of area except for Florida and the upper Midwest and the Northeast section. If you move to the next slide, the TVA slide shows I just ran out of battery in my my computer. The Sector 4 for TVA, as is represented, is part of the region that the Southeast Power Administration occupies, and as you can see, from Tennessee to Mississippi, all the way out to Alabama and part of Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia, is what the TVA boundaries are. If you can move to slide 9. As far as Bonneville goes, we have over 22,000 megawatt of generation. Our transmission line is over 15,000 miles. We have 142 load-serving entities and almost about 3,000 employees. WAPA, Western Area Power Administration generation is over 10,000 megawatt, 687 load-serving entities, over 17,000 miles of transmission, and employs 1,500, versus SEPA is at almost 3,400 megawatt of generation with 472 load-serving entities, no transmission miles, and covers 44 employees. Then again, when you put the SEPA territory and TVA territory, they overshadow each other pretty well. That's the reason SEPA has no transmission lines. Southwest Power Agency generation is over 2,200 megawatts with 113 load-serving entities, and they have about 1,380 miles of transmission lines and 200 employees roughly. TVA, the largest, has over 32,000 megawatt of generation, 153 load-serving entities, and over 16,000 miles of transmission line with employees over 10,000. Quite of a large system that TVA manage, and I'm sure Joel and Southern Company and others in that region are well familiar with TVA and TVA presence in that region. I'm going to pass it out to Daryl to go over the Canadian side.
Actually, I'm taking over for the Canadian side.
Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
yeah. So this lists the companies in Sector 4 in Canada. So you could see BC Hydro, Sask Power, Manitoba Hydro, Ontario Power Generation, Hydro One Networks, Hydro Quebec, and New Brunswick Power. You could move on to the next slide. You'll see on this map, you see with the light blue color, light blue are mostly are all Crown corporations and vertically integrated. And in orange, you see Ontario, which is decentralized, unbundled, although it does have generation and transmission that's owned by the government. The dark blue show the portions of Canada which are not part of Sector 4. The northern portion where you see Yukon and the territories, it's because it's not connected to the North American grid. You see between BC and Saskatchewan, for the people who are not familiar with Canadian geography, you see Alberta there. Alberta is in dark blue because it's in Sector 4. It's an ISO RTA organization. If you look east, you see Nova Scotia, which is right next to New Brunswick. It's in dark blue. That's because it's an investor-owned utility. And finally, you see next to Quebec, in the northeast portion, you see Labrador and Newfoundland, which is the same province. It is not a member of NERC, and it's not a Sector 4 member neither. Although it's connected through Quebec by Churchill Falls, the lines coming from Churchill Falls generation. I think I've covered this slide pretty well. We could go on to the next one. I just want to show you the footprint of Canada within North America. So you could see the large territory that's covered by the Sector 4 members in Canada. I'm going to pass it on to Daryl for the next slide, please.
Thanks, Stefan. So just focusing on the previous slide where looking at the light blue and the orange, another couple comments about Canada. So in Canada, the Sector 4, these entities provide approximately 90% of the generation, the transmission, and the distribution services for their provinces. Also in Canada, when it comes to Sector 4, in addition to the generation, the transmission, and the distribution, they also provide the power marketing function. Next slide, please. A large portion of the Canadian population is located in the eastern half of Canada. So that's primarily Quebec and Ontario. And that's where there's more customers. So in Canada, the population density on the prairies, where it is quite a bit sparser, the transmission is much longer in order to serve every megawatt or each one of these customers. And in Canada, because of the differences in the population densities across the country, each area has its own unique challenges in order to provide the service. And the last comment I just want to make on this slide is that in Canada, Hydro-Quebec is the largest generation utility when it comes to generating capacity, the number of transmission circuits, and the customer base. Next slide, and over to you, Edison.
Thank you, Daryl. As far as trade organization goes, by law, U.S. Sector 4 entities cannot be member of any trade organization, like the EEI or APPA or large public power associations. However, we are member of like reserve sharing groups or North American transmission forums or folks like that that may provide service for us, but not lobby for us. Then that's how the U.S. is structured as far as the PMAs and TVA goes. Daryl, back at you. Oh, I'm going to cover the Canada also. The Canadian Sector 4 entities are member of the Electricity Canada. Electricity Canada is a primary trade association for Canadian electric industry. Their membership is not specific to a grid function or a business model or a generation resources. One of the Canadian's two independent system operator, IESO, Sector 10, is also a member of trade association. Then the association, the way it's structured, is the member pay for it and so on, and they are lobbying for the electric utility industries within Canada. If you can move to slide 17, please. The way the Sector 4 convenes, as far as the U.S. side goes, the PMAs and TVA, we have a point of contact. When I served in the MRC, the 2 terms, I had a point of contact for every policy input or areas of concerns or issues that coordinations are needed. I reached out to the point of contact and they elevated the issue to their own specific organizations, and we came to a conclusion that what should be our position in some of those matters. Our Canadian counterparts, they go through Electricity Canada which is let me say exactly, Electricity Canada's Electric Regulatory Advisory Committee. This committee is for area of interest of all the regulatory matters within the Canadian electric industry side, which does include NERC. And their membership includes representations from the Sector 4 entities that are registered, and they meet on a monthly basis. What we do, i.e. for policy input, even though we have our own respective processes, we discuss with each other before we finalize our response to the board and to the MRC members in regard to the policy input request. And a lot of times we see a lot of things in the same manners, but in the past we used to support each other's letters, and we decided that's no longer really needed. Rather, this is what the U.S. perspectives are, and this is what the Canadians' perspectives are. If you can move to slide 18. Interesting to note when Daryl, Stefan, and myself and the team, Robin and Meg, were working on this slide, how much commonality we have on areas of the risks that face us as a participant in the industry. Of course, the top one always is the extreme weather conditions, which again, we are quite thankful to MRC and the board members, as well as NERC leadership, Jim Robb and his fantastic team, that they deal with this issue, but recognizing that for those of us that are in the northern quarter of the geography, we already had a lot of this stuff for the cold weather standards. We already had self-implemented a lot of those things. But again, it's good to have those separate standards and go through it. Large loads, we are facing tremendous amount of penetration of the data centers, the storage load, and crypto load. And I'm really happy to see NERC actions on it, creating a task force under RSTC and trying to create some movement in regard to that. My own personal side note, I feel strongly that load needs to be a registered entity, needs to follow the similar standards as a generator does, because the implications on the system is quite similar to a generator. By having it on and off switch, they can change the frequency, the inertia, the voltage, and so on and so forth of the system. AI, top on our list in respect to the physical and cybersecurity issues, and it's going to be a fascinating movement in this area. How we're going to control this going to require a lot of work. Energy policy alignment, especially in the states and at the federal level, we see a lot of disconnect in this area, and our hope is our risk committee will discuss more on the energy policy side of this, that how can we get the alignment going between the states and the federal on from carbon to generation additions to behind the meters and so on and so forth, that does have implications in the BES system. The affordability and built out, it kind of goes hand in hand, trying to raise capital to build the growing demand on the electricity side. It forces rate increases and all that. Then the affordability and rate regulations are challenges that we are going to face down the road, especially when we look at our infrastructure. And we have facilities that over 150 years old, and thank God there were great, good, solid coppers those days that was used for the wires and transformers and so on. But those margins are being taken away, and more built up would be needed. Of course, the integration of the DER and the WERS, again, quite thankful for the actions we took on the IBR and the great initiatives with FERC coordination and activities on that. I hope more needs to be done. As Howard knows, I'm more into reducing the threshold from 20 MVA to something lower, and make sure the aggregator will be part of the IBR standards down the road. With that, that concludes. And Daryl, would you like to add any additions to this slide? I want to make sure from Canadian side they also hear you. And Stefan, please.
I have nothing further to add, Edison. Thank you. You did a great job.
Thank you, sir.
Just one detail regarding the cold. You mentioned cold weather, but we're concerned with extreme weather as well, whether it's cold or not, because we have, although we are well prepared in the north for cold weather, we see emerging challenges regarding the weather. One of them, as some of you might know, is prolonged drought for hydraulic generation. We've had 2 years of low water input in Quebec, and so thanks to our multi-year management of reservoirs, we're doing okay. But it's becoming an issue. That's it comes not only from climate change, but it's an issue that we've been seeing in the past, but it seems to be accelerating as we speak right now. So thank you, and thank you very much, Edison, for the good presentation as well.
Sure, thank you. And let me really quickly also add to really the partnership we have with our Canadian folks, with the rich hydro generation they have and how we utilize that generation in the U.S. During the on-peak condition and how we export during the off-peak condition to protect the water and the storage associated with that has been an excellent partnership with every province that I know we deal with BC Hydro in British Columbia and with Alberta AES. It has been a great partnership all along in the West, and what I'm hearing through my actions at the MRC and at NERC, that I see the great partnership also with Ontario as well as the Quebec and so on the east side. With that, we go to any questions, anything we can entertain.